Hello and welcome to Pobsa's Dharma Lounge. I invite you to think of this as a time and a place to sit back, relax, where we can discuss all things Dharma. Hi, I'm Pobsa Frank Jude, and this is Pobsa's Dharma Lounge. I want to, before I begin talking about this episode's topic, to express my gratitude and thanks to all of you who have sent emails. It's very cool that you have found Big Sky Mind, the last episode, which was a practice-oriented episode, so helpful. Many of you described for the first time really attaining that sense of expansive awareness. So that's cool. It's nice to get that feedback. I would really appreciate it if, continue sending emails if you like, but please, it would be great to see more comments on the YouTube channel and ratings if that's possible. And subscribe. That's probably the most important thing. If you can subscribe, and share it. Share it with those that you think might either benefit from it or just be interested. Also, as you know, I don't monetize this podcast. It's a labor of love. It does take time, energy, effort. And so the practice of dana, which is a practice of kind of a gift exchange going back to the original Sangha of the Buddha, is something that I encourage my students to engage in. Dana, it's basically just sharing. And so anything that you can offer is really gratefully accepted and deeply appreciated. Since the last episode, I would like to thank those who've offered dana: Andrew Fitzpatrick, Ilchu Andre Talbot, Gabion Sally Weber, Hyokan Tatiana Staloff, and Kenkyo Dana Erickson. Thank you all very much. So today I want to talk about problems and how ironic it is that practitioners of a form of yogic discipline, or if you want to think about it as a practice of spirituality or a religion, Buddhism can be thought of as all those. It's a teaching that emphasizes that life is stressful. After all, it's the first noble truth, or the way I prefer to call it, the first reality for the noble, right? Dukkha, often translated as suffering, but it's much more subtle and expansive than that. It's stressful, right? And so it's kind of ironic that practitioners of Buddhism will often offer a litany of problems that they face in practice as if that's a problem, that they shouldn't have it, right? But why should practice be any different from the rest of life? Problems are inevitable. In fact, they really should be seen as inevitable. The problems that you will face on the path of practice are precisely the means that will ultimately help you to progress along the path. And facing these difficulties in meditation will give us practice in confronting problems in the rest of our lives. In fact, in time, you'll probably see that the uncomfortable stepping stones of the path are and have always been precious gems. And the most important aspect of practice is virya. And those of you who practice asana, or postural practice, you know Virabhadrasana or Virasana, right? Translated as warrior or hero. But virya literally means persistence. It's an energetic persistence. Never give up, and you can never fail. So the first reality of the noble tells us that life is stressful. And so meditation, which is really a microcosm of and a window onto life, will present us with the same challenges that we'll face elsewhere in life. In fact, along with the difficulties that we face in life that will arise while sitting, the very practice of sitting will bring its own special challenges. So, not only should we expect problems, we may as well welcome them in. Now, the complete acceptance of the discomfort and stress of practice leads to its amelioration. To accept dukkha takes courage. It takes the determination to look at difficulty head on without averting our gaze. And courage doesn't mean that we have to be fearless, right? It's not fearlessness. In fact, fear is an essential component of courage. You can't be courageous unless you can feel your fear completely. If you're able to stand your ground rather than averting your gaze or taking flight, that is courage. As Richard Petty, perhaps the greatest NASCAR driver of all time, said, King Petty, right? King Richard, you'd have to be crazy not to be afraid to climb into a race car and take to the track with 40 other drivers going 240 miles an hour bumper to bumper. These men and women take the fear that they have with them as they climb into their chariots and drive with passion and courage. If you think about it, the posture of meditation itself is a posture of courage. In determining to sit in stillness, we're declaring our willingness to look bravely at whatever our mind churns up without taking whatever our usual exit strategy might be. And if you reflect for a moment, you'll have to agree that the experiences that have most contributed to your personal development have been the trials that you've faced and moved through. In retrospect, we understand this, but prospectively, we often fall into fear that they will overwhelm us. And yet, often, it is the fear and anxiety that is worse than the actual experience. As Mark Twain is reported to have said, I've known many troubles, but most of them never happened. Now, think of practice difficulties as simply aspects of experience that require attention. Many times, there really is nothing to do and nothing to solve, only something to watch, to embrace, and learn from. Now, there are many difficulties that arise in meditation that are not really any different than those that arise in other aspects of our life. But there are also some difficulties that may be specific to practice. Discomfort for most of us is one of these challenges. Almost everyone must learn to deal with the discomfort of sitting. And that may include backaches, knee pain, feet that go to sleep, pins and needles. Now, some of these discomforts do lessen over time, but others never completely go away. One of my favorite sayings from Suzuki Roshi is something that he said to his students while on a long retreat. He looked out at them and he says, "The problems that you have now, you will always have." So, when you begin to experience discomfort in practice, the first thing you need to do is just see if there is anything you can do to eliminate it. After all, there's enough pain and discomfort in life without adding more of it with your practice. But when you find that there are certain discomforts that cannot be removed by changing external circumstances, mindfulness can show us that they can be mitigated by and through practice. First, we can learn to see the difference between discomfort and suffering. Discomfort is an unpleasant sensation. Suffering is a mental and emotional reaction to the discomfort. It may or may not be associated with the sensation of discomfort. In fact, it's possible to suffer without discomfort, and equally possible to feel discomfort free from all suffering. Suffering arises often when we resist discomfort. We may feel a sense of unfairness. Our fear of the discomfort may lead to panic, anxiety. Resistance to discomfort arises because of the often unstated and unconscious belief that discomfort is wrong, that it should never happen to us. Such belief is actually a major cause of suffering. It conditions anger, fear, anxiety, discouragement. One way to work with the suffering and discomfort is simply to realign ourselves with reality. Believing that discomfort should never happen to us is delusional. With sufficient practice, witnessing of the discomfort will lessen the suffering, and sometimes through that, even lessen the discomfort, because resistance is often what keeps the discomfort kind of locked in place, like reified. So we can allow the discomfort to become the object of mindfulness. We can relax any tension or muscular contraction around the unpleasant sensation. The mental attitude that we are encouraged to take is one of curious disinterest. Now, disinterest simply means that you are not attached to any particular outcome or agenda. For instance, if you're at a race and you've bet on one particular person, you've got an interest in that race now. But if you're just watching, right, there's no real investment or interest in that way, right? You're just watching. So if you can pay attention as a strategy to lessen discomfort, what you find is that grasping for a particular outcome actually works against you. So there needs to be that kind of hands-off, curious disinterest. Now, in the early stages of practice, it's really unrealistic to expect that this observational meditation will be easy or even obviously beneficial. However, with time and experience, even the most unpleasant experiences can be ameliorated. Take your time. Patience is really an essential aspect of practice. When you feel that you've reached your capacity and you begin to lose focus, do anything else. Changing your posture, scratching that persistent itch to alleviate this discomfort, but do so mindfully. Right? With mindfulness, you actually move from a reaction that's been conditioned by the unpleasantness to a response to it. Right? So there are some situations where you want to just be one with it, as one of my teachers once said. It's sometimes helpful to do that. But if we reach the capacity where this itch is just too much, mindfully scratch it. But again, that is not the same as just reacting as soon as you feel it. Right? Give it some time, investigate it. Right? Move from that conditioned reaction to a volitional, skillful response, and just let it go. Other problems specific to meditation are, quote, strange phenomena that may arise. We may experience sensations of floating, expansion and contraction, and these sensations may be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. You may feel like you're spinning like a top, right, or rocking and all that, and that might not actually be physically happening. I remember being on retreat once, feeling like I was in a volcano. I had to have been moving, and yet it was one of those centers where there was a monk who would have yelled out, "Stop moving if you're moving." And so I never got yelled at, so I know I wasn't physically moving, but it felt like I was. You may become distracted by images that arise internally if your eyes are closed. You may become distracted by strange patterns on the floor, like faces morphing into weird shapes if your eyes are open. When any such experience happens, treat it like anything else that arises. Observe, reflect upon your reactivity. Drop any aversion and grasping, and it will fade away soon enough. Just don't make a big deal out of it. The most tenacious problem while meditating is difficulty in focusing. And this is particularly upsetting since concentration, focused attention, is really a necessary skill for any form of meditation. It's always there to some degree or another. Remember that each time you catch the mind wandering and you gently bring it back to the breath or your mantra or whatever else that you're focusing on, that is concentrating. And it also refines our mindfulness. After all, it's mindfulness that sees the wandering mind. Getting irritated or frustrating is the problem, not the wandering. That's what minds do. If lethargy, sleepiness, or fatigue is a problem, you may need to eat more moderately before practice and get more sleep. But keep in mind that just the typical fluctuations of daily life will impact your level and capacity for focused attention. There are various counting and labeling techniques, as well as mantra and visual gazing strategies that may be helpful. And then finally, perhaps, doubt and discouragement often come up when we're dissatisfied with what we may perceive as our lack of success in meditation. And that may make us feel like giving up completely. So first, if you find this happening, remind yourself that really the only way that you can fail at meditation is not to do it. If you take your seat, then no matter what is happening while sitting, you're sitting, you're doing it. The struggles and so-called failures are all part of the process. And second, you can look at the sense of discouragement itself as an object of mindfulness. See where it comes from. How does it arise? What does it feel like? Watch its coming, its going, its wavering degrees of intensity. Discouragement is no different than any other mental formation. It is impermanent. And sometimes the greatest problem in meditation practice is just sitting down, taking the seat. Regardless of how you feel about meditation in any particular morning or moment that you normally practice, just do it. Just do it anyway. You don't have to like it. You don't have to want to do it. Just do it. No excuses, no negotiations, no argument. I think it was Jack Kornfield who advised, just get your ass on the cushion. Make that your absolute bottom line, no pun intended. Don't even begin to think of how long you're going to sit or what you're going to do. Just get your butt on the cushion. If you can commit to this, you'll find that more often than not, once you get your butt on the cushion, any aversive feelings you had evaporate after just a few moments. You kind of like, I'm here, I might as well just sit for a while. Once you settle down, you can even begin to investigate what your aversion was all about. You may find some subtle fear was under it all that you can now observe with courage. And I just want to end with a somewhat humorous but very telling story of the Buddha. Right? It said that a Brahmin had heard that the Buddha was in town and he was supposed to be a really great teacher. So the Brahmin goes to the Buddha and says, I have 85 problems and I hear that you can help me with them. So the Buddha says, well, what are your problems? And he starts to enumerate it. Like, he says, well, I have this farm and last year we had a drought and I had hardly enough food to feed my family. This year there was so much rains that the crops were rotting in the ground. And the Buddha says, yeah, that's a problem. And then he goes on. He repeats, like his kids, he loves his kids so much, but they don't respect him all the time. They don't do what he says, on and on. And at the end, the Buddha says, yeah, I counted along with you and there were 85 problems. But you have a couple of problems that you didn't even think about enumerating. The Brahman's like, what are you telling me? I've got more problems than I even said? He goes, yeah, you haven't mentioned anything about the fact that you're aging and that you're going to die. And so now he's like totally crazy. He says, what kind of teacher are you bringing me more problems? And the Buddha says, well, I really can't do anything about those problems. There's only one problem that I think I can deal with here. And the Brahmin says, what is that problem? And the Buddha says, you want a life without problems. So stay well, be well, and hopefully we'll all be here for the next episode of Pobsa's Dharma Lounge. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Pobsa's Dharma Lounge. I hope that you find some solace in understanding that problems are just part of life, and how we relate to them can bring freedom and even joy. Thanks again. Stay well, and may we all return for the next episode of Pobsa's Dharma Lounge.